Recently, the Supreme Court made a set of decisions and signaled on others, and together they could change who can buy a gun, how they can buy one, and what kinds of guns are even legal to assemble. For some Americans, the door to gun ownership just cracked wider open. For others, it might slamming shut, or at least becoming much more complicated. You might believe you're entirely safe. You passed your background check. Your paperwork is clean. You know your rights. But this isn't business as usual anymore. One rule you overlooked, one subtle legal detail you don't fully grasp, and you could be walking into a legal trap. If you're thinking of buying a firearm or building one, there's a crucial, non-negotiable step you must take before you do anything else. Miss this step, and the legal consequences could be catastrophic. Not just a fine, not just a warning, but possible criminal liability or losing your right entirely. Don't scroll past this. Don't hit skip. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just theory. It's real. It's now. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down 3 major legal shifts, some settled, some pending, that reshape who can own a gun and what must be done before you make your next move. Chapter 1. The Ghost Gun Ruling. What just happened? First, let's talk about ghost guns. These are the invisible weapons, kits, parts, frames, or receivers that can be bought and assembled into a working firearm, often with no serial number. For years, these have been a loophole. Because they're unmarked, they're difficult for law enforcement to trace. But on March 26, 2025, the Supreme Court issued a major ruling. In Bondi versus Vandertok, the court ruled 7-2 that at least some of these ghost gun kits fall within the scope of the Gun Control Act of 1968, meaning that they must be treated like firearms. Manufacturers must put serial numbers on them, sellers must run background checks, and other regulatory requirements apply. Writing for the majority, Justice Neil Gorsuch explained that many of these kits are readily converted into functional firearms. No heavy machining, no exotic tools, just a few parts and some relatively simple work. He pointed specifically to the buy, build, shoot kit, noting that as sold, it effectively functions as a weapon. This is significant. What it means is that not everyone can just anonymously order a ghost gun kit online and build a gun without oversight. The ATF regulation that requires serial numbers, background checks, and licensing for these kits now has the full backing of SCOTUS, at least for a broad class of them. Chief, among the implications, manufacturers are now held to stricter regulatory standards. Buyers of these kits will be subject to checks and age requirements. The court's decision affirms the ATF's ability to require age verification. Some individual kits might still be challenged later. The court left open the possibility that very particular designs could fall outside regulation. But while that's settled, there are much bigger questions still looming. Ghost guns are just one piece of the puzzle, because the court is now taking up who more broadly can even own a firearm. Stay tuned. The next case could append what habitual drug user means and whether that person can legally carry a gun. Chapter 2, the Himani case. Who can and can't own a gun? Enter United States versus Himani. One of the most closely watched gun law cases headed to the Supreme Court right now. The court has agreed to review a lower ruling, and its decision could transform who is legally allowed to possess a firearm under federal law. Here's the backstory. Ali Daniel Himani is a man who had a Glock 9mm handgun plus what law enforcement described as 60 grams of marijuana and about 4.7 grams of cocaine when the FBI searched his home. He was charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 922 G3, a federal law that prohibits individuals who are an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance from possessing firearms. Himani challenged that law, arguing it violates his Second Amendment rights. In 2024, a district court dismissed the indictment, agreeing that the blanket prohibition as applied to him was unconstitutional. The Fifth Circuit later affirmed that decision in early 2025. The government didn't back down. In June 2025, it petitioned the Supreme Court, and in October 2025, SCOTUS granted certiorari on the line whether habitual or unlawful users of controlled substances can be categorically barred from owning guns or whether that blanket ban violates the Constitution. According to the Department of Justice's petition, the Fifth Circuit erred in finding the ban unconstitutional as applied to Himani, Department of Justice. The DOJ defends the law as a reasonable restriction on people who pose a potential risk, arguing it doesn't completely strip the right, only disarms during periods of unlawful use. On Himani's side, legal scholars note that his argument relies on historical tradition. He claims there was no clear analog at the founding for disarming habitual drug users and that the government's interpretation of danger is overbroad. He and his lawyers also critiqued the federal restoration process under 18 U.S.C. Section 925C, saying it's not a meaningful fix because under current practice, it's difficult to restore gun rights once revoked. The court rules for Himani. Hundreds of people currently barred might see a path to restore their gun rights, and a whole new legal standard could apply for dangerous classes under the Second Amendment. But if SCOD sides with the government, the restriction could stay or even be strengthened. The stakes huge. Chapter 3, the age restriction shakeup. 18 to 20-year-olds set up intention. Meanwhile, another major legal fault line is cracking open, the age at which someone can buy a handgun from a licensed dealer. In January 2025, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Reese v. ATF struck down the federal law that barred 18 to 20-year-olds from purchasing handguns from federal firearms license FFL dealers. The court held that this age restriction violates the Second Amendment. Judge Edith H. Jones wrote for the panel that historically 18 to 20-year-olds were considered part of the people in the context of firearm rights. She pointed to early American militia laws. At the founding, young adults were often required to serve in the militia and to provide their own weapons. The court also rejected the government's argument that this age group lacked certain civic rights at the founding, jury duty, voting, etc., and therefore should be excluded. Jones noted that other groups without those rights, like women or black people, were still part of the people under the Second Amendment. Important. The court's decision doesn't just rest on textual interpretation. It applies the test laid out in Bruin 2022. That means restrictions must be consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulation. In Ree, the panel found no sufficient historical analogy for barring 18 to 20-year-olds from gun purchases. This has enormous implications for the first time at the appellate level. A court has officially challenged the idea that young adults should be categorically excluded from purchasing handguns from licensed firearms dealers. If this decision holds or is adopted by higher courts, it could lower the age barrier for handgun purchases nationwide. But many questions remain. Will this ruling apply only in the Fifth Circuit, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, or could SCOTUS eventually weigh in? And how will the ATF respond? Chapter 4, how these rulings intersect, who can now or soon own a gun. Now let's pull these threads together, because when you look at the ghost gun ruling, the Himani case, and the age restriction ruling side by side, they tell a bigger story about what ownership means in 2025 and how the definition is shifting. 1. Ghost guns. Many kits are now regulated, making it harder for people to build untraceable guns without oversight. So the pool of who can assemble a gun is narrowing in regulatory terms, at least for certain kits. 2. Drug users. If SCOTUS rules for Himani, then a significant category of people currently disqualified could regain eligibility to own firearms, specifically habitual drug users, depending on how the court frames unlawful use. 3. Young adults 18 to 20 with RE. That age group is being redefined. If the appellate ruling is upheld, it could open the door to licensed handgun purchases for younger adults, potentially expanding gun ownership among people who were previously shut out. Put differently, the legal window for who can own a gun is in flux on multiple fronts, not just who is disqualified, but who is newly qualified and under what conditions. But here's the catch. These changes don't automatically apply everywhere or to everyone. Depending on your age, where you live, your background, or whether you're building a gun, your risk, your rights, and your responsibilities may look very different after these rulings, and that's where the must do before buying comes in. Chapter 5, the must do before buying. So, what must you do before you go and buy your next firearm or even a ghost gun kit? Based on these rulings and the legal trends, here are 5 critical steps you can't afford to skip. 1. Confirm your background and eligibility. Check whether any of these new or pending rulings affect you. Are you between 18 and 20? Do you have a history of substance use that could be recharacterized under the Hemeny standard? These rulings may change or challenge how eligibility is assessed. Even if a case is pending, like Hemeny, don't assume a free pass. The law hasn't fully changed yet. Use caution, especially when buying from dealers or kits. 2, understand ghost gun regulation. If you're buying a kit, make sure it comes from a licensed manufacturer and is compliant with ATF requirements. Serial number, seller, license, background check. The Supreme Court has made it clear many kits count as firearms. Ask the seller directly for verification that they comply with the ATF's frame and receiver rule. Some kits may still challenge the regulation in lower courts, so due diligence matters. 3, know your local and federal laws. Gun laws vary by state and locality. What SCOTA says sets the floor, not the ceiling. Your state may have additional age restrictions, licensing requirements, or serial number rules. Check whether local gun dealers are updating their internal policies, especially in the Fifth Circuit, to reflect the age ruling. Just because a court says something is constitutional doesn't mean every dealer will immediately comply. 4, consider legal advice or counsel. Given the complexity and the fact that some cases like Hemeny are still pending, it may be wise to consult a firearms attorney or Second Amendment legal expert, especially if you fall into a prohibited category under older rules, drug user, restraining orders, etc. You are 18 to 20 and unsure whether a dealer will sell to you. You want to buy a ghost gun kit and want to ensure it's regulated properly. 5, document everything. Keep receipts, serial numbers, and correspondence with sellers. If you're buying a kit, save records of the transaction, your background check, and any licensing paperwork. In the event of a future legal challenge, or even if the law changes again, having documentation will be invaluable. If you skip any of these steps, you could inadvertently violate federal law, even if you think you're just following the rules, and the penalties for doing that the wrong way, they could be severe. Chapter 6, why these rulings matter beyond just who can buy. Let's zoom out for a moment and consider the broader implications. These rulings and pending ones aren't just technical legal shifts. They represent a larger transformation in how the Constitution, modern technology, and evolving social norms interact. Technology meets law. Ghost guns are a perfect example of how modern innovation tests legacy regulation. The Supreme Court's decision affirms that even in a world of DIY 3D printing and kit assembly, there are enforceable limits. Second Amendment doctrine evolving with cases like Hemeny. The court is being asked to re-examine who counts as the people under the Second Amendment. If the court rules in favor of Hemeny, it could expand the scope of protected persons, age, and civic rights. The age decision in the Fifth Circuit challenges long-standing assumptions. Founding-era practices, militia service, and historical context now serve as powerful fodder for rethinking modern restrictions, legal risk, and gun ownership as a right. Rights are not absolute. These cases show that even fundamental rights like gun ownership are bounded by regulation, and those boundaries are still being fought over too. So where does that leave you? The gun buyer, the enthusiast, the person thinking about the next purchase. The legal landscape is shifting under your feet. That's why taking these must-do steps isn't just smart. It's necessary. The future of gun ownership in America is no longer predictable. It's shifting fast, and how it unfolds will directly affect who can buy, who can keep, and even who can legally build a firearm. Hemeny case. The Supreme Court could fundamentally redefine whether habitual or past drug users can legally possess firearms. If the court rules in Hemeny's favor, a pathway could open for many who were previously barred, potentially restoring rights to hundreds, even thousands of Americans. But if the court sides with the government, the prohibition remains firmly in place, leaving many still excluded and potentially vulnerable to legal consequences. Age restrictions. The Fifth Circuit's ruling in favor of 18 to 20-year-olds is already shaking the system. Other circuits may follow suit, challenging long-standing assumptions about the age at which one can buy a handgun. Depending on how federal regulators and SCOTUS respond, this could either expand legal ownership to millions of young adults or trigger new legal battles that prolong uncertainty. Ghost guns. Even after SCOTUS upheld regulation for some kids, the law around these build-it-yourself firearms continues to evolve. Lower courts will scrutinize what counts as readily converted into a functional weapon. That means both buyers and manufacturers must navigate a legal minefield because a single misstep could lead to serious criminal liability. Restoration of rights. Individuals disqualified under older rules, whether due to drug use bans, past criminal records, or other restrictions, may pursue legal restoration pathways. Success will depend on SCOTUS interpretations, administrative policies, and potential congressional action. Legal advocacy groups on both sides are already intensifying their efforts, which means the rules could change rapidly. The reality is clear. Who can own a gun, under what conditions, and what types of firearms are even legal to possess or assemble is in flux, and this new landscape could affect you sooner than you think. Here's what you need to do right now to protect yourself and your rights. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every new ruling, clarification, or challenge could directly affect your ability to legally buy or possess a firearm. Staying informed isn't optional, it's essential. Share this video with anyone who owns a firearm, is planning to buy one, or could be impacted by age or eligibility restrictions. Your knowledge could save them from costly mistakes or legal trouble. Comment below. Are you between 18 and 20? Do you already own a ghost gun kit? Have past disqualifications affected you? Sharing your experience could help others understand and navigate this fast-changing legal landscape. The rules are changing, the courts are acting, and the stakes have never been higher. Don't wait. Act now, stay informed, stay legal, and protect your rights before it's too late.